On three, say Cucamonga. One, two, three. Cucamonga. Okay. Alright. Whatever this is called, we're started it. No,
Alright. We're talking about licensed games. Licensed fighting games. Why? Because, I've been talking about it down and off with Souston. Some people have tried to get into fighting games that are based off of existing properties for the sole purpose of seeing if it has a competitive edge to it, or just because they like it, because it's based off of a thing they like. And, sometimes they'll find nothing and then just leave it alone. And sometimes they'll find something and, maybe that sparks a following down the line. To basically keep this video from being a little too long, I'm nailing that down to 5 things, and 5 things only. 5 properties for now. Let's see how I'll feel about it, or how he'll feel about it as time goes on. So it's Ultraman, Naruto, Kamen Rider, Kinnikuman, and what's that last one? Let's see. Let me check my notes. Let's see. Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Dragon Ball, Naruto. Oh no, yeah, those are 5. I can't count. Anyways, Ultraman.
What about Ultraman? No one cares about Ultraman. What are you talking about?
Oh, what's your connection to Ultraman? Because I know you've played Ultraman games. Much less, not even counting Ultraman fighting games.
Well, gosh, like many people, I've tried playing that one Ultraman game that came out back in 1991, Towards the Future, which was based on the same engine that the Japan exclusive Ultraman games were. They're all fighting games technically, but the main draw is that they are single player fighting games and you mostly fight monsters. There are versus modes in some of them, but that's not the main draw. And I tried Towards the Future back in the 2000s, and I tried the original Ultraman game, and I tried the Ultra 7 game recently. They're all very rough to play, honestly.
Why?
The hit detection is wild. You can get floored by a tiny little rectangular bar that's supposed to represent a laser beam. But, you can swing your arms and legs as wildly as possible, and they'll still whiff on the monster until you get right next to them. It can be a frustrating time, especially with the Ultraman game in particular, because they reenact the ending of the Ultraman series, which, spoilers for a nearly 60-year-old show, over 60-year-old show. At the end of it, you have to shoot a giant monster with a dart-sized projectile to blow it up. And you only get one chance. And it's a really finicky aiming system for a game that has no business having a first-person shooter segment.
Oh, that's the fight against Zeton, right? You're playing as Adachi?
Yes.
Okay, well, in that case, is it still good as an Sorry, if you're a fan of Ultraman, and you want to... Or if you just want a fun single-player experience, is it still a good time?
Yeah, if you'd like to try a 2D fighting game, especially one with a heavy emphasis on the single player, that's a good enough time, I think.
Okay, so it'd be like playing single player Fatal Fury 1.
Kinda, yeah.
Cool. And for any of the other Ultraman games, is
the funny thing about that is that Bandai went through this phase in the early 2000s where they basically did the same thing, but on the PS2. So you had an Ultraman fighting game, which was actually pretty close to the show. You had a Nexus fighting game to tie into Nexus and the Ultraman movie, the one from the 2000s with the air pilot. Since those two shows are directly connected, like Nexus is a sequel to the previous game. To the previous, the aforementioned movie. You had one for... Gosh, I think Tiga and Dyna had one in there. Like New Generation, something like that. Although that was for 98. And, all of those are also pretty interesting. The single-player games are something really, because like it's, how do I put this? You know, that sort of focus on being true to the original source material to a fault is something that didn't happen in the 2000s very often, and yet there you go. You've got 2004 entry in the series where it's just so focused on making sure that it follows the story of the original Ultraman show and Return of Ultraman later on in the game that there's no real frills to it. You don't have a lot of goofy side modes, you don't have lots of mini games. It's mostly just trying to follow the story, not necessarily beat for beat, but as many interesting plot points as it can fit in.
Okay.
So, for a kick or two, like, those are also fun games to play, but I wouldn't say they're terribly competitive. Closest thing to competitive, I think, is the Fighting Evolution series, which is the big crossover between all the games.
Alright. Have you seen anyone try to do anything with those?
From time to time, you know. Funnily enough, most interest in the Fighting Evolution series is in machinima. Sorry, what's the term for making movies and TV shows out of video games?
I'm not sure, actually. That's a good question.
I think it's machinima, but it's been so long since I've paid attention to that sort of thing.
On that note, you can just tell us in the comments. And if you know of anyone doing anything with any community or project regarding any of these games that we're going to be talking about, also let us know in the comments.
You know what's making me hesitant? I know that it's machinima, machine cinema. That term existed before the channel of the same name, but they just kind of took it over.
Huh.
And look at them now.
What are they doing now?
Oh, they're defunct. They're done.
Fuck. Does that mean we can take it back?
There's nothing to take back. The term existed outside of them. I'm just saying, you know, mentally, there's a kind of block there. Anyway, like I was saying, you know, the Fighting Evolution series was really popular when it came to like making fan fights, because obviously you've got the tools right there. All you have to do is set up a match, take out the health bars, and you can have your own little choreographed dream match between other ultras, specific monsters, that sort of thing. So a lot of the focus went into that, oddly enough.
So
it's funny to think about, really.
So it's like something akin to Fire Pro Wrestling?
Yes, basically. Which is natural, since there's a lot of wrestling in Ultraman shows in general. Kind of lends itself towards that.
We're going to be seeing a lot of that as an occurring theme in a lot of the franchises we're going to be talking about, isn't it?
Maybe, maybe not. You never know. But yeah, so, you know, personally, I saw more of that than I did anybody trying to run sets. Certainly haven't seen any money matches in Fighting Evolution. Maybe outside of, maybe in mystery tournaments from here and there, but not like as a regular thing. So if there is a dedicated Ultraman Fighting Evolution subculture or like community, I haven't seen them yet. But I would say that 3 is probably the most positively viewed Fighting Evolution entry. Because, you know, the first game, yeah, it's real rough around the edges, naturally. The PSP games are basically kind of like modified versions of the original games that they're parallel to. And 2, still kind of rough around the edges. 3 has the roster. It's got the speed. It's got the combo structure that people can goof around with a little bit. If anybody was going to take it competitively, I think that's the one. There was a 4th entry in the main series called Fighting Evolution Rebirth. And that one, to me, is like visually my favorite because it's so flashy. But it also kind of had the Street Fighter 4 Ultra problem before Street Fighter 4 came out, wherein supers kind of take too long, you know what I mean?
Okay, understandable.
Like, it's great to watch. It's not necessarily great to sit through, because you get these long, lavish sequences where these classic moves are really stylized. Like, you've never seen Ultraman Taro light himself on fire and explode until you've seen it in Evolution Rebirth. But as far as like the pace of the game goes, that can weigh things down, and then on top of that, you've got a smaller roster because they put more time into the characters they had.
Oh. That sounds like a double-edged sword.
It is, because, you know, the thing about Evolution 3 is that it has more characters, but the moves are much more simple and direct, you know. If someone shoots a beam, they're going to shoot a beam, and they're going to stay perfectly static while they do it, and it's going to be at a static angle, and there's much less flash to it. Rebirth is very pretty looking, and, you know, it's very stylized, and it looks neat, but in terms of, like, the roster, it's lacking, and I know people care about that, especially since, you know, it's a crossover game. When you have a crossover and you take characters out instead of putting more in, that kind of dings the game's reputation a bit.
Well, as a single-player experience, is it still a good time?
Yeah, but I would say it has more to offer as a multiplayer game than its predecessors, is what I mean to say.
All right, then. Is that as much as you could think of for Ultraman from that point on?
Pretty much. Like, obviously, you know, if you go by the D&D fighting game alignment, we could theoretically incorporate the Ultra Fight card ride system as a competitive game, because it's not a fighting game, but it is a competitive game if you really want to try and make it one. But I feel like that might be a bit of a stretch.
Okay, cool. So, that said, doesn't seem like there's much in the way of having a good time with Ultraman.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. Like I said, you know, in terms of combos, it's a little hit and run. You don't get a lot of, like, long, definitive game-ending combos in there, but there's a nice back and forth. I would say it's worth goofing around with, and there's some juice to it, but not a lot. Like, okay. It's not exactly something that's hidden away from public eyes. It had its time in the sun. People more or less know what it's about, and while the tech that was written down is probably lost to time because the forums it was on are probably down by now, it's still, you know, it's got something. It's worth messing around with a little bit, especially if you're an Ultraman fan.
You can play most of those on emulation now, right?
Oh yeah, pretty much. Scratch that. All of the PSP games can be handled by PPSSPP or your PSP emulator of choice. The mainline Fighting Evolution games, as well as the aforementioned single series games that I mentioned earlier, are almost all on PS2, except for the T-Gun Dino one, which is on PS1. Although that's really more of a 3D game now that I think of it. And, honestly, I kind of forget which system the earlier ones I was talking about for the very first game, and for the very first Ultra Show, and Ultra 7, and Towards the Future. I think they were Super Nintendo games? Possibly? Probably.
Okay. So
they're all relatively easy to emulate, considering if you've got like a mid-range computer at this point. Net play for the PS2 games might be a bit difficult, but I know it's possible, one way or another.
Okay. Well, covering Ultraman, it's one guy. Let's bring this down to size, focusing on personal favorite of mine, Kamen Rider. What are we looking at?
Okay, especially now that we're talking about Kamen Rider, we kind of have to go through the alignment chart. How far can we go? How radical can we get?
I want to say that the furthest we go is Tobei Tachibana trying to get Amazon the least. Are you going to go least competitive to most competitive?
No. Mechanical purity and structural purity.
Okay. Structural purity being?
Whether or not it's a action game, one-on-one competitive, multiplayer with a sideways view.
Okay. All right.
And mechanics would be it has to have like blocking, combos, input specials, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Like, I'm only half kidding. This isn't the most important thing, but I'd like to know how silly we can get.
All right. So the silliest is, I'll give an example from the actual series itself, in terms of like just with a dumb shorthand. Silliest, Tachibana Tomei trying to get Amazon onto the Jungler bike. The most
and that is
rigid.
A game.
And as a game, in terms of the fiddly, weird, silly bullshit it becomes, and on the right is just to its furthest extreme, taken to its most logical extent, ride with the devil status. Just fucking Kuga grabbing the Gronky Rhino horn before he impales himself, and then fucking doing a sick attack right as he hits the ground.
Oh boy, I feel like you're going for metaphors when I was going for like how far into game can we go, but that's fine. I guess I'll just try and interpret that. In that case, well, I guess as far as Kamen Rider goes, like number one with a bullet would be the 18 games that came out recently. I say recently, it's been like a decade for some of them.
How long were they going at it for?
Well, gosh, I think Climax Heroes came out around the time that Decade was in the middle of its run, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
And that's around like 08, 09.
Mm-hmm. So I'm really familiar with Kamen Rider, both with your involvement and my own venture into it since I was a young boy, a wee young lad. And I've always been curious about those fighting games, because I've only played the Ryuki Aiden game, that was just called Dragon Knight when it got here to the States.
Yeah.
No, that's it. Yeah, that's the only one I've played. I'm familiar with aiding games, but not the Kamen Rider aiding games in the exact same sense. Haven't been hands on with them, but I know of Aiding's reputation as a company. I've seen your videos on them, and more importantly, their work is one of those. We're going to see a fair mention of their work here in this video, for a good number of things, Naruto especially. So, this one's probably going to be the one that branches out into a bunch of different directions, into different parts of the video, for one reason or another. Most notably being, I know they have a lot of asset reuse for the aiding Kamen Rider games.
Sure.
It's not necessarily to its detriment.
It's not. You're right.
But I must add, did that really bug people after a certain point when the games were coming out?
I don't think anybody really cared back then.
Good. Does anyone care now?
I don't think anyone cares now. Well, to be fair, like, I think at the time, like when it came to things like Naruto, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, I don't know, but when it came to games like the Clash of Ninja series, I know people would deride those games as like asset reuse, like to a fault. It wasn't exactly like flattering, especially the people who. How's the best way to put this? To people who didn't have a lot of money to spend to begin with, seeing a lot of characters do the same moves, or like having a lot of the move list be universal, wasn't exactly a great impression at the start. So I know that some people like didn't really respect that sort of thing, and that when they figured out it was 18, like 18 gets some flack here and there. But I don't think it's as widespread as it used to be, and I don't think anyone really cares anymore, honestly.
Okay, so moving on from that, putting that there, since Kamen Rider was a huge thing that Aiding worked on for a decade, right?
More or less.
Okay, so when was the last Aiding game for Kamen Rider?
Well, technically, I think the last one was Battle Ride War Sosei. But, gosh, when was that? Actually, hold on. I think the Climax Fighter games might actually be more recent than that, because that one goes up to Zio, which is that was 2018. So never mind what I'm saying. 2018 is the... Wait, hold on. No, that doesn't count. Those games were made by what's their name? That one was made by Lancars, not Eighting. The previous one, which was about Build, was made by Eighting, but not that one. Not sure what to make of that one. Oh, did you know that's the same developer that pitched in on the EX Versus series recently?
Oh, really? What was their involvement?
Well, they helped make Extreme Versus 2. They helped with the home port of Maxi Boost On, which is the version that came out in the States. And I think they're still working on it with... Gosh, how do you... Cross Boost. I know it's... I think the katakana is on Kurosu Boosuto, which is... It's definitely Cross Boost, not X Boost.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking all this preamble. I'm not actually telling you anything about like what the game, what like the competitive or non-competitive or any fighting game is.
You know, that's fair. But in order to get through that, so there's the Aiden games. But what other Kamen Rider fighting games or action games? No, sorry. What other Kamen Rider fighting games were being put out either before or after?
Well, I think before Climax Heroes, the last one that was made was the Kabuto video game, which came out around 2006, which is around the tail end, I think, of the show.
Okay.
Of the same name, I mean. And before that, you had tie-ins for Faiz, and before that, Blade, Agito, Ryuki, although I said those two out of order, and Kuga. Aside from that, I feel like there must have been some Kamen Rider video games where they fought one-on-one, but that's just a hunch. I don't actually have a clue. I know that before then, most of the Kamen Rider games were SD stuff, since SD was pretty big in the 90s and 80s.
Okay, so there's just one thing that's on my mind from that point on. I'll get to Kabuto in a minute, but let's start with the earliest ones. You know, with the, I guess the PlayStation? But, you know, like the Kamen Rider Kuga and Kamen Rider Agito ones. Those are basically single-player fighting games at that point, right? In the same way as, like, Fatal Fury 1?
Well, no, not necessarily. Okay. There's a lot of stuff in single-player, but you also have a versus mode. I think any versus mode that like lets you play with a majority of the characters featured should be considered as much a part of the game as a single player. I only say that Ultraman's games, the earlier ones, weren't really fleshed out in their versus mode because they wouldn't necessarily let you play with all those characters. A lot of them were locked into single player, I think. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. I won't take it personally, I promise.
So these are all Heisei era games, right?
Yes.
In the sense that, you know, none of them are going to be strictly focused on the Showa era without at least giving a nod to the Heisei era in some capacity. You know, like...
That is not the case.
Okay. Cool.
That's not true, because they made a game for the very first Kamen Rider series around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty fun, all things considered. Out of all of them, I feel like it's one of the more interesting ones because it's the one that tries to goof around with stuff as far as the enemy's powers are concerned.
Okay,
like,
does it have a versus mode?
Yes.
How is it?
It's fine. I mean, they're all... The thing is, they're all pretty much the same game, more or less. It's just, you know, the characters are different, and occasionally, like, you have a conceit attached to it up until, like, the Blade game, where, obviously, like, since Ryuki is a card-based show, you have cards to pull in order to have your weapons or do your attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, like, from Kuga to Agito, from Kuga to Ryuki, they're all essentially using the same assets, the same animations. And obviously there are series specific things too, but like they're basically the same game.
Okay, so as single player experiences or as multiplayer with friends, how is it?
I think it works just fine, but it's a very stop and go kind of game. You know, a lot of the combat, a lot of the fighting involves basically landing a solid hit and then positioning. Like it's I guess I would say it's pretty derivative of Street Fighter. You know, you land a solid hit and you keep doing it until you can keep somebody down. I don't think there's a lot in the ways of infinites, although if there is, I'm gonna feel silly. But I've played it here and there. I've seen a lot of footage of the game, people fooling around with it, and a lot of it is pretty stop and go, like I said. Like,
you recall...
you want... Hold on.
Oh no, go ahead. You want what?
I was gonna say, now if you want to see infinites in something tangentially related to Toei's tokusatsu output, you go to Super Sentai.
Oh.
Like, obviously you've got your examples of it with like Power Rangers Fighting Edition, the Hurricaneger game that came out back in like 0203. Heck, you can get a taste of that with Battle for the Grid, honestly. That game still has infinites.
With regards to making sure a game has a specific kind of balance, or making sure the game has longevity, this was made in the 2000s when like this was just done for whatever show was happening to come out at the time, right?
So well, there's that, but there's also like sometimes you just want to appeal to an audience that may have a PlayStation. Like, there's no coincidence that they went with a PS1 game for the original Kamen Rider and a PS1 game for V3 almost immediately afterwards. This was the 90s. That's about, 20 years after the shows were on the air. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you want to tap into that market and make something that'll appeal to a working age person who remembers seeing the show and would like to fool around with it for a bit.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But, it's not like anyone's going to make an update to them. This is not that era. Or at least not that era, especially for tokusatsu games. And in fact, would there ever be do any of these games have updates or patches, even the 18 games, that are on the level of like a super turbo update?
You could say that every Climax Heroes game was an update on that level, because they always added something.
Okay.
I think Double, added a lot of characters. OS added a sort of assist conceit, because you had like super moves before, but it let you pick whether or not you were going to use your super form or not. I think that was the game that introduced assists that could pop in, like Kabuto's bike or Auto-Vagine from Faiz or that sort of thing. Okay. If it's not OS, it's possibly Forze, because they kind of run together for me a little bit. Okay. But I know Forze's thing was it was an anniversary series, so they brought in a lot of the older characters, like the original Double Riders, V3, Black RX, that sort of thing.
All right, that checks out. Now, if you were to look at any of those PS2 games PS1 games before Aiding was given the reins to kind of work things out with the Climax Hero series, which one would you say is the one where you could see how people could try to do something competitive with it, but it just either it can't, or it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is kind of fucking goofy, you really sure you really want to jump into this? Because for that one, the only one I could think of is Kamen Rider Kabuto for the PS2.
Yeah, to an extent. That definitely is up there. I was wondering where you were going to go with this, and of course it's that one.
Well, that is what spawned this discussion in the first place. I saw stuff like that and talked about it with you. because of a friend named Rockforge who has put some time into that and says it's a fun game, and I believe him. But it is definitely one of those things where I can look at it and say, yes, that the clock up feature or the clock up ability kind of that determines how some people are going to want to engage with that game significantly.
Well, that's a very diplomatic way of saying it. I mean, the way I see it, you're either in or you're out. Like, the clock up is there to stay. It's one of the most important parts of the game because it's one of the most important parts of the show. So, I think that we need to give credit to Bandai and whoever worked on the game for capturing the concept so well and actually bothering to make sure it was executed in such a direct way. Like, it works just like the show. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to understand, but like it makes sense. You pop clock up, you move fast, the other character moves slow, and they have to either pop it in response or hope that they can survive whatever you do. It's as simple as that. I would say it's definitely competitive because I know I would watch match videos on it around the time that it came out and for like a year and a half afterwards. People were playing it. Like maybe it was just a little click or, just friends who were really into it. I couldn't tell at the time because fortunately I couldn't read Japanese back then or now, and I don't even know where those videos are. But if you were to like maybe search on Nico Nico Duga or something, you could probably find old videos on it where people were really going into it.
Okay, now when you say really going into it, and I just kind of want this to get kind of gonzo right now, just how fucking nuts does Kabuto get with the clock up in that game?
See, it's not crazy. It's just, either you clock up or you don't.
There's just is this like the end all be all? Like there's no, like once it starts, there's pretty much no way to get out of it once you're in?
Pretty much, because, you're moving at the speed of a sound and the other person isn't. There's really nothing you can do except for maybe cast off, and even then, like, it's pretty easy to see what's going to happen if the person isn't, like, right next to you. Maybe I should explain. So in the show and in the game, cast off is something you can do. Every character, except for the kick hoppers, I think, has a suit of armor that they have. It's not necessarily the best mode, but you have a heavy weapon to swing around or use, or in Drake's case, you have the gun, and it's still good. You take a little less damage, and you have the ability to cast off, and it basically goes off like a shrapnel bomb. All the pieces of armor start flying, and then the secondary layer of armor underneath kicks in, and then you can do all this stuff with clock up, and you can basically move faster. Everything goes into slow-mo, and the only way to not stay in slow-mo is to counter-activate clock up in return. That lets you move as fast as the other player, and then you're basically playing the same game for a while until the initial clock up runs out. And then, depending on how long you had, depending on when the counter-activation happened, that's how much time you have left to fool around and try and mount a reverse offense.
Okay, so is there kind of, is it just easier to just knock the shit out of somebody by just doing the same attack once you do the cast off? Or should you be doing different things for different characters? No, never mind. I'm putting too much thought into this. So your end goal when you just do the cast off is just basically just do an infinite and then kill him, right?
No, clock up. Cast off is just like a burst, essentially.
Clock up. So when you clock up, you just get in there and you just hit him with the same attack and then bam, that's it, right?
Well, you hit them with whatever you can. You're not necessarily just going to loop the same attack in every case. Okay. There are plenty of attacks where they knock people away and you're going to have to reposition yourself in order to make another hit. You don't want to just constantly charge up your rider kick all the time, especially since I think the game does the same thing that the show does, and you have to charge it up in increments.
Oh, okay.
That's your best attack. So normally what you'd want to do is hit them and make sure their body floats over to a point that's advantageous to you, and then you hit your rider kick. and that'll do a ton of damage. A lot of combos worked that way, but I recall that some combo routes were more interested in like positioning so that you could make sure you were far away when the person recovers, so that when they clocked up, they'd have to at least run over to you and burn a couple of seconds of time.
Okay, so it seems like these titles did a pretty good, or trying to still maintain a sort of faithful adherence to the source material, and also try to be a fun game, and that's commendable. And then that brings up an interesting point when you get over to the aiding games.
Wait a minute. No. We can't say that because there's a bunch of other games that didn't try to do that at all.
Oh?
Like, Blade Game doesn't really do that. Blade Game just treats it as like your typical arcade card-ass metered thing where, you have a move list and you charge up your bar and you get to do one move based on how much meter you have. Yeah. Fives was the same way.
Okay.
Like, you didn't really, like, have the freedom to, like, use... Let's say you're playing Fives. You don't get to do Crimson Smash, which is his rider kick, the big red funnel thing. You don't get to do that on command. That's essentially a super. There's a bar on the bottom with 3 segments, and you have to charge it up in order to use the respective move.
Okay.
And the big fancy ones are essentially just ultras. You hit it, and then you get to have a little struggle bar, because that's what all the games have to have in order to make sure the defending player has a chance. And then once
like World Heroes 2?
I suppose, yes.
What the fuck? Okay.
I mean, you've played the Budokai games. It's basically like that.
Oh, okay. We'll get to that.
Oh, no. So, yeah, you hit the super and you get to watch the little scene play out, depending on whether you won or lost the power struggle, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't really try to imitate what's going on in the show because, well, the show involves a lot of pressing buttons. Likewise with Blade, the show is about like scanning. As far as the fights go, you either like fight like a madman or you scan a card. It's not really something that you can gamify in a satisfying way, unless of course you had like a card and a plastic sword to give to the player themselves.
Okay, I think I understand. So then we go to the aiding games, and from what you've told me and what you've shown me, and what I'm now going to get further into depth here with, that can either get really fun or really fucking stupid.
Oh, I don't think it's stupid at all.
All right. Now, I believe that, and I understand that. And I do apologize for for making an assumption that all those PS2 games were trying to be very faithful to the source material. But now we get into the thing I mentioned earlier of Tachibana Tobe trying to get Amazon on the bike and fucking struggling. Because there are things in those games, from what I've seen, the Climax Heroes games, where, there's just some things that work a little bit better because, they have more experience with fighting games. They're trying to get things a little bit further along. So as a 3D fighter, how do you say they handle supers?
Only one will go on.
Because there's, a move where you can just, you do the special attack, you do the finisher, right? But then there's shit like Takeshi Hongo doing the rider kick, or he does an attack and the narrator just stops time to explain the attack.
That's not that big of a deal, honestly. It's just a gag.
Okay.
I don't remember if it's something that you could turn on or off, but I do know that it wasn't something that stuck with the character for the rest of the series.
Oh, okay, good. See, I was worried that was the case.
Yeah, no, it's not like that. I think mostly that was just like a gag. I can't remember if you could turn it on or off, though, because I didn't spend too much time with Forza.
So the idea, essentially, is that since it's not based off of any specific title, any specific writer show, and it's just a crossover, right?
Well, technically, the first one was based off of Decade, because Decade's whole thing is, we've got Ersatz writers here, and let's fight. Let's everybody fight.
All right. So,
but after that, it was just more of a focus thing. Like, oh, we've named this game after Forze, so we're introducing Forze. Everybody else gets to have their end of show forms. Forze is the big new deal, so he gets to be the marquee character, even though he's a little underdeveloped because we don't know how the show is going to end.
All right. So, as a single player experience, how is it with those games?
It's okay. They're all fine. They try to either replicate stories in the case of some of the later ones, or they tell an original story, like most of them did. It's mostly just text and stills and nothing particularly impressive, but like as a single player game, it's serviceable. They try to tie everything together, give some sort of pretense for single player. It's okay.
All right, now could you choose to play it competitively?
Oh yeah, there's enough juice there to have a competitive scene. I know that people were pretty serious about it when it came out. They were compiling frame data, that sort of thing. You have to do a lot of work in order to make it competitive, though, because in its normal state, it is a kid's game with combat mechanics out the wazoo in order to make sure that everybody has like a fighting chance.
Oh, could you give an example?
Well, for example, there's this thing called Climax Time that pops in when players at low health, and that player gets to have full meter, just like that.
What?
Yeah.
Nice. Sick.
Yeah, so the first thing most people did was turn that off.
Oh. Aw.
Do you really want to have to deal with a comeback clock up, possibly after you just had to deal with that in the first place?
Oh yeah, how bad is the clock up compared to the PS2 game?
It is the exact same thing.
Oh, does that make things worse or better?
It's fine.
Okay.
I don't think it's a big deal, honestly. It seems clear to me that 18 was determined to replicate it because, that's the show's conceit. You clock up and then it's over for a little bit. So obviously, they would make sure that they got that just right, and they got it in one. It works just right, the same way. It's a trip, honestly. And since you're not playing in an isometric view, or like an over the head view rather, and it's a 2D game, the typical combo fodder temptation rears its head. I tried it for a while. I put some time into trying to figure out how to clock up, and I think a similar thing can be done with Excel, but I don't know for sure. Actually, I'd have to double check.
Okay. So,
no, that's in the Batch Ride games. Never mind.
All right, so they take out the climax time. They take out climax time being a thing in games that you play competitively. But what else would you have to change to make that game work more, or make those games work?
Well, you'd also have to get rid of the power struggle anytime somebody hit a special. Sorry, not special, a super.
What's a power struggle in this case?
It's the same as it is in every game. Your bar comes up, and you're expected to mash in order to push the bar higher for your side, and the side with the longer bar wins.
All right, yeah, okay. You get it. Yeah, sorry, I get it. I've played Budokai. Although, is it more timing based in certain instances?
No, Blade was actually more timing based, honestly, but that was in single player. When you wanted to do your finishing move, you hit 4 buttons in sequence, randomly generated, bop, 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 and then you get to do it or not.
Nice.
But yeah, okay. No, you just mash in Climax Heroes.
What else do you have to change?
Well, not necessarily change, but in the later games you have the option of using a super form or having a helper. And I guess you'd have to figure out whether or not you're going to do that at all. Whether or not helpers were acceptable. I think most people were cool with that, but not everybody was okay with it.
Why's that?
Because the helper would be more like an assist, and it would basically just pop up, take up a big chunk of the screen, use an attack, and then leave.
Oh, okay, all right. So, is it like a Marvel assist essentially?
No, no, not like a Marvel assist. I don't know how to describe it. It's more like
A KOF striker?
a very big one.
How big?
You've seen Autovaijin before. It's the scale.
Oh. Huh. Yeah, that's in real time?
Oh yeah, it shows up, it hovers, it shoots, and then it flies away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that could be a bit of a nuisance to have to deal with. Is it like the Zords in Battle for the Grid?
Well, no, they're not nearly that big.
Oh,
Except for Castle Doran. There's a big castle that pops up.
What? They just have that big fucking castle just pop up in the background?
Well, it's a tinier version of it. You don't actually just see one gigantic wall show up.
Could they have been able to do that?
Maybe.
Well, alright. I'll accept that.
So, you mentioned 3D game, but... well, kind of. They work 3D. I'm not going to dispute that. You could, at some point, like, sidestep and everything. Mm-hmm. But I feel like you didn't actually get to, like, free roam until the very last game in the original, like, lineup, which was Super Climax Heroes. That was the one with Wizard as the marquee character.
Okay. So, as those games were progressing, did you see anyone's attitudes towards it begin to resemble something like, yo, man, we got to make a community around this? Or was that already just there from the outset?
That's already just there. You're talking about Kamen Rider fans. Of course, if there's anything even remotely like multiplayer, they're going to flock to it.
Okay, so in that case, what was your connection to that?
I played it. I occasionally would tell people, hey, check this game out. But I didn't really talk with anybody like, oh man, I want to make a community around this. It was more like I would watch people like Rex Soprano and others like that just kind of talk about whether or not the game had any juice.
Which it did.
Which it did.
Okay, well, what do you see people do with it now?
Not much. I'm sure somebody plays it somewhere, but I haven't gone looking for the videos in a while. I think I saw more of like a quote-unquote community built around the Climax Fighters games.
Okay. Well, with regards to the aiding games, where does the Dragon Knight game fit into this?
Who did... I guess it would have to like depend on who made Dragon Knight. I'm trying to remember. I think it was... Gosh. I think it was still 8ing. There were 2 games, if I remember correctly. There was one for the Wii, and there was a different version for the DS, As far as the DS game goes, I don't think it was particularly, like, polished, because it was just kind of a downgrade. Functionally speaking, Dragon Knight Wii was basically like a clone of the Climax Heroes game up to that point. So, it had something going for it, but everybody was using the Ryuki style, essentially. Like, they had cards, they had a bar. I think they had the same metered mechanics. Because, in the even as far back as the first game, you could basically roam and cancel with a segment of the bar. It was split into 4s, and you could use a 4th of it to, like, cancel a move you had. Or a string. I think everything except special moves could be cancelled. So, you could basically, like... I guess, like, for example, if you had a ground string that could stagger a character, but the last hit of it made the character that you're hitting fall down and you couldn't recover quickly enough, you could just roam and cancel that string and get a couple more hits in. It was really fun in the first game, but ever since then they increased the damage scaling by quite a bit in order to make sure that it wasn't as strong.
Okay then. Alright.
The funny thing about the DS game, I'm very sure. I think what they did is they took the old. They might have taken the old models from the Ryuki game for the PlayStation 1 and just like made something out of that.
What the fuck?
Look, it could be that it's the exact same models, or it could just be that, because it's a DS game, it's going to look like a PS1 game anyway. But they were different models. I can tell you that much.
Okay.
So you had the characters fighting on the bottom screen, and then the top screen had the cards, and you could cycle through them with left or with L or R. And gosh. Yeah, you would pretty much just kind of swing left, right, up, down, jump ins, that sort of thing. And then once you build up a bar, you can just do a super by selecting the Advent card. It was, I feel confident in saying that there wasn't necessarily a scene the way there was for, say, Bleach Dark Souls. I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong. But I don't think that was the case. For the DS game. I do know that people tried to play the Wii game to an extent, but I don't think that lasted. I think that kind of stopped around the time that the show went off the air. Speaking of which, did you know that the Japanese reverse import of the show, Dragon Knight, was actually pretty popular?
Yeah, actually. Go ahead. Tell me.
Right.
There's probably more that I can know now. All I know is that it was so popular they got the actors from the original Ryuki TV show to dub over the Dragon Knight actors.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? The whole story behind Dragon Knight is a doozy, more than I care to go into at the moment. So I'm not gonna.
Okay. But
what I will tell you is that the show, rebroadcast in Japan and dubbed over, was a hit because it came around the same time as the Kamen Rider's second most recent boom in popularity. So it's like, hey, it's another show. Why not give it a shot? Apparently, it was a big hit. So it's funny to think of, but it went over pretty well to the point that they made spin-off novels. They rebroadcast it a couple of times. I don't think the Dragon Knight release was brought over to Japan, but I could be wrong. It just, I don't know, something about that kind of makes me laugh.
Damn. That is, that's fascinating to think about, considering that, I don't think about Dragon Knight that often. But without Dragon Knight, I would not have gotten into Kamen Rider.
Huh. Wild.
Very. That said, though, from time to time, it's just important for me to think about how, its place and the things it spawned are nothing to nothing to scoff at, especially with regards to American tokusatsu. I'm going to lightly put it.
You mean sci-fi shows?
Is that what I would just put it down as?
I don't know.
That makes things a lot easier. Yeah, it makes my life easier. I'll do that. Okay. So that's is anything else come out for any news or anything of that sort for another Kamen Rider game? That's fighting game.
Are you asking me if there's any new ones coming out?
Yeah.
Oh, as far as I know, no, not really. I think
No.
the series stopped with the Climax Fighters games, which you haven't asked me about. But before I bring that up and force that in, so last thing about that Dragon Knight game.
Okay.
After that game came out, Eighting decided to put all the stuff in there into Kamen Rider OS, because up until that point, Ryuki's series didn't have all of its characters, didn't have the monsters in the story mode. It was just kind of there, because that's how it was in Decade. So after Dragon Knight came out, they reverse imported it into OS, and it was there from then on, basically. So, that's a fun little tidbit. If it wasn't for Dragon Knight, you probably wouldn't have had all that Ryuki stuff in OS until much later, if ever.
Okay. That's kind of neat, actually. So, Climax Fighters.
I'm a little less familiar with that, but I do have a good friend who got into the first one pretty hard. I know there was a scene for it for a bit. I don't know if there is still a scene for it. It is essentially, how do I put this? It's not an arena fighter in the sense that you can use the environment to your advantage, but it is an enclosed space with 3D free roam where you are attacking your opponent. It's kind of like EX Versus, and I hate to like constantly use that as a reference point, but like the developers worked on those games eventually. Like it's a fair comparison to make. Right down to the fact that it uses a point system for downs and everything. You have a meter, you have a life bar system, and you have the ability to like resortie essentially, because you have I think you have stocks, right? And once a character dies, they come back, but they can only come back so many times.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like I said, it uses a point system for a down. So for those who don't know how EX Versus works, what happens is once you hit somebody, in addition to damage, each attack has a point value attached to it. So, for example, if you hit someone with like a laser beam, that's 2 points. If you hit somebody with a melee attack, that's 1 point. If you hit somebody with a melee string, the first attack has like 1 point, and then the other attacks will have like different point values based on how the developers want the structure of the combo to go, right? So the thing about that is, right, once you hit 5 points in an uninterrupted string, the characters will go into an automatic down.
Okay.
Right, so like you hit somebody with 3 laser blasts, that's 6 points. They've already gotten hit by 5 points. They're going to start spiraling down, and then when they get back up, they'll have invincibility until they get back up.
Okay.
And that's kind of how it works in Climax Fighters. I don't remember how the points work exactly. I don't think it's as standardized as that. But more or less, that's how it goes. So that kind of has an impact on like the flow of the fight, because if you go in a little too hard, you're going to get a knockdown no matter what. But I don't know if it works the same way, in the sense that if you leave a character alone, they will eventually like reset their point system, reset their point value, and then you can hit them more again. Not entirely sure.
Okay.
But from what I remember playing and seeing, there's some value to it. Definitely, it's not just the sort of game where you mash and kind of see who gets their like hit off first. There is something to it, especially since there's the same kind of attention to detail and attempt to be accurate to the TV shows as you had in the Kabuto game and the Climax Heroes games. The fast characters can move to the point where other characters seem like they're slow. It's not just a Kabuto thing. Since Climax Heroes basically did the same thing for fast characters there. Let's see here. And, in Climax Fighters, it's more of the same. If a character's really fast, the others look like they're in slow motion, and I think you can counter-activate. Although, honestly, I don't remember doing that myself.
Okay.
I would say all the games are like worth playing a little bit, if not like outright, like trying to become competitive in it. Although obviously, like they weren't really built for it, so there's going to be a little bit of jankiness here and there.
Okay.
Climax Fighters a little bit less because I'm pretty sure it's modeled off of EX Versus. EX Versus is a big hit in Japan. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried modeling Climax Fighters off of it a little bit. And that game is very competitive. Toxically competitive, even. So, naturally, that's going to bleed in, and you're going to get a little more, of a bite to Climax Fighters a bit. But, I would say they're both fine games, fine series. spend too much time with the Zeo entry in the Climax Fighters series, but it seemed to be like more of the same, a refinement of sorts. So it's fine too. All in all, I'd say like those games especially are like really fun to try and sink your teeth into. It's fun. Like,
can you tell?
Go on.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, in terms of mechanics, character gimmicks, combo strings, combo routes, and general like feel of the hit stop and hit stun and blocking and attacking, it is your quintessential 18 game with a lot to offer. If you've ever played any 18 game, you'll probably if you played and enjoyed an 18 game before, you'll probably like those games.
Okay, well, in that case, wait, could you tell me one of your fondest memories playing the Climax Heroes games?
Well, I played it.
Some of your fondest memories playing the Kamen Rider fighting games in general.
Always with friends. My favorite memories are of playing those games with people I knew in Florida, and just trying to see what we could get away with, basically. Like, even people who don't know anything about Kamen Rider have at least something to get out of it, because it's just a genuinely enjoyable game to fool around with.
Alright then. I guess I should also ask what was one of your fondest memories playing Ultraman, the Ultraman games that we talked about previously, if you want to cover that before we move on.
Well, I guess that would be streaming them. Because, I had chat, goofing around with me a bit. And I could point and see, look, see? That's the attack from blah, 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 blah. I remember that. I clapped when I saw the thing.
I want to make fun of you for that, being like, oh, you fucking nerd, but now I'm in there too. To the point that, like, I'll look at the Digimon Adventure 01 episode cards when they do the fucking, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like they got the monster in silhouette, right? And they do that with the Digimon and Digimon Adventure, and I'll go, oh fuck, it's that!
Yeah, we are but simple creatures. Nostalgia makes us lose our minds for a few seconds.
I'm so sad they didn't bring that back for the new Digimon show.
I'm sad about the new Digimon show, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay, so, we talk about Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Tokusatsu Tokusatsu games for Tokusatsu shows. But now, we focusing on the real shit!
Whoa! Don't spike the audio, man.
Ball. And Dragon Ball Z. And Dragon Ball GT. And Dragon Ball Super.
Well, what's there to talk about, man? Like, we're barely qualified.
Most of them, people have, we all know. Because, this is a very overwhelming subject, and I gotta be careful how I maneuver around this, know what I'm saying?
Yeah, hell, that's them outside.
Biker guy.
Those are the Dragon Ball fans getting ready to hear what you're saying.
Oh shit, that's what I was gonna say. I was like, oh fuck, did it come? No, oh no. I just heard that one, like, charge sound for the Kamehameha. I could feel it.
Right.
It's gonna be big. More importantly, Dragon Ball is the biggest comic book on the face of the earth. Period. Right? That's not an exaggeration.
I think so, yeah. Like, what could possibly rival it? Like, what? Naruto?
I guess, like, internationally. Something from Marvel, like Spider-Man or
You mean
Batman.
in the past or now? Oh, look, never mind. No. We're not going to talk about that. That's his comic book stuff. I'm pretty sure that, like, internationally, Dragon Ball is, like, the big thing. Still. Even now.
And it will continue to do so for however long. But on that note, that means there's a shit ton of stuff. There's a shit ton of games out there. A bunch of fighting games. Because that's what they do in there. So why wouldn't you make something based off of that?
Right.
And they run the, like, unlike the other titles here where you could at least go like, yeah, man, some of these are pretty good. These are pretty good. You know, they got some merit to them. Like, some of these are just doo-doo. And some of these are just really bizarre and kind of weird. And others are just fighting games, like True Blue. Like, we're not going to get into fighters because everyone already understands the weight that comes with looking at fighters as a fighting game. It is obviously, it ticks all the boxes. It's good for people who are fans of this, fans of it as a of either the anime or the manga. It looks good, it sounds good, it plays good, yada yada yada. Anything else past that is either extraneous or dealing with things that are outside of the game's development, and you know, even things that are in the game's development that, like, you could argue are just things that are happening as a result of trends or what have you, or things that are just affecting games in general.
Sure.
But we need to go back in time.
To another world?
Not yet. Wait for Naruto for that. So, like, what is the first what's one of the earliest Dragon Ball fighting game titles you remember getting your hands on?
Budokai 1, I'd hate to say, but that's how it is. Like, it took over. Go on.
Now, that's important, and I have to cut you off because then I have to ask this next question, and then you can go back to the previous one for Budokai 1. Now, what's the earliest Dragon Ball title you've gotten your hands on? And by that, I don't mean, like, when was the earliest memory you could have. I mean, what is the oldest Dragon Ball fighting game you've ever played?
The oldest one I've ever played, huh?
Yes. How old is that shit? I need the shit to be covered in dust.
When did Hyper Dimension come out?
Hyper Dimension, 94?
Well, there you go.
I should check that just to make sure. Hyper Dimension. As you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, I'm in. My computer's slowing down. Okay, I don't have that answer right now. What I do have, however, is Hyperdimension Neptunia, which is not the same thing.
No, that's not the same thing. Look.
Oh, Hyperdimension came out in 1996.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, so Budokai 1. Those two games are going to be our vaulting points for whatever reason. Budokai 1, talk to me.
Well, you know, it was the wave. It was one of the best things to happen to gaming, apparently. It was a huge deal, especially around 2001, where some of the English-speaking countries were just getting into the swing of their broadcast of Dragon Ball. You know, you had that going for it for, like, Europe and US and Canada and those places, and then, you know, that was right around the time Dragon Ball was having another renaissance. So, you know, other countries had a reason to get into it too. And it was a very, I want to say good. I think it was good even for its time. At the time, it was like a good game, an interesting way to handle, like, all the different transformations and whatnot that the series had to offer. Even, like, cheekily throwing in a capsule system to try and tie that in, of all things. And as a game that covers, like, from Saiyan Saga to the Cell Saga, it's like, it was a phenomenon for the first 2 or 3 years that it came out. Like,
okay,
I would go to game shops, which was essentially like arcades back then, except, you know, they would just kind of, like, hook up a bunch of systems to a bunch of TVs and charge you like $10 for 10 minutes. And, you know, before Budokai came out, you know, people were playing stuff like Bloody Roar, Primal Fury, or 3 specifically. You know, you had that. You had Street Fighter EX3. People were playing, like, old cabs of King of Fighters 2000 or 2000 or 99, that sort of thing. A lot of variety. After it came out, nothing but DBZ Budokai 1. Nobody
son.
was playing anything unless like the consoles that were using that were like playing Budokai 1 were occupied.
Damn shit. Damn son, this was a blowout.
Absolute blowout for at least a good 2 years straight.
Holy shit.
Budokai and Smash Brothers Melee. That was basically the pulse of St.
Okay.
John's.
During the quote-unquote dark age of fighting games.
Well, pretty much.
Yeah. Now, you could contest that title for however long you want, for whatever reason you want. But more importantly, there was a community, and it existed for this game.
I suppose if you want to call it a community. It's really just a loose association of people who want to slap around other people using Cell or Goku or Vegeta or Krillin.
Okay. All right. So, what are the Budokai games doing? Or what is Budokai 1 doing mechanically that you can just be like, oh yeah, at the end of the day, I can come back to this, you know, maybe do some matches, maybe do some sets.
Well, as far as like the gameplay goes, you know, chain system is pretty decent. It's basically a dial a combo system, but it works well enough. And I think it was one of those first. It's like a. What's the word I'm looking for? It's like a landmark in the cinematic fighter vein, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like it was one of the earliest 3D games where you hit somebody and you got to see like a little scenelet instead of just a special move. Which,
Okay.
you know, that had been a thing, especially in Dragon Ball games for a while. That's nothing new, but like it was the earliest time that it was realized fully and properly in 3D, and it was a treat for the eyes. So, you know, obviously that's a big draw.
All right.
But, you know...
So...
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. I have no sense of pauses in a conversation. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm not helping with my pauses either. Let me just, like, smash through. So, you know, obviously, that's a big kick. Like, that's a big thing to look forward to. But eventually, you know, that's not the meta. You know? Like,
Okay.
you can only knock somebody into Warp Kamehameha so many times before they eventually catch on. So, you have this, like, situation where eventually, like, people have to start picking their capsules properly. Like, they have to figure out which moves they want to actually put up with or not, what boosts they're going to run, that sort of thing. So you would get people who wouldn't necessarily go for the big flashy stuff. They'd just, like, focus on stuff that worked. Like, oh, let me load up a whole bunch of, like, sensu recovery items and attack boost, and I'll just stick with the Kamehameha and cheese my way that way. And it would work. And people would be called cheap accordingly.
All right.
But, like, that level of... like, there weren't a lot of customizable fighters back then, and a lot of them took, like, a lot of prep work to set up. I don't think Budokai had that problem. I think Budokai was a lot more accessible in terms of, like, having a customizable fighter to put up with. And that's something that stuck with it for basically the entirety of the series, I think. Even Infinite World has that going for it in its favor.
All right. Now, would you say that the fighting games for... Would you say that for the fighting games in this franchise, they've all pretty much managed to nail... their presentation is the single most important factor. Well, I mean, that is the single most important factor for a fighting game. Right out the gate, because that's what gets people to go to it. But would you say that's never been that's regardless of the mechanical regardless of the mechanics of what's going on under the hood, none of them have ever missed when it comes to art direction.
I don't know
or
about that.
A good number of them have not missed.
I don't know about that, Chief.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm
we
asking
both know.
because I'm asking from a place of, like, have most of them done it? Because I want to know the answer genuinely. This is not a rhetorical question.
Gosh. You know, I can't say I've seen every single Dragon Ball fighting game. I've seen a good chunk.
It's fair.
But,
It's fair.
like, gosh. I want to say that most of them are visual treats and work out pretty well. But like,
Okay.
even as I say, you know the ones that aren't. But like,
Well,
there are games that are dedicated fighting games in that IP. There are games that have it as a secondary function, and even the ones that kind of have it as a side thing are like generally decent. Like, you know me, I'm a big fan of Advanced Adventures versus mode, as silly and limited as it is.
mm-hmm.
Gosh. And, the Budokai games, especially the ones that came out after 3, like Infinite World and all that other stuff, or the PSP games, they've got people playing them with good reason. Like, there is some meat to it. It's not something that should just be dismissed as a goofy, highly customizable, silly game that has nothing to it. It's got something to it. I would say that generally, like, the ones that focus on being a fighting game, they usually try to, like, get pretty close to the way the series looks, which is always appreciated, and then, that's the priority. Sometimes the gameplay comes together anyway, sometimes it doesn't. Like, I mentioned Hyperdimension earlier. It looks great for a 1996 game. Whether or not it plays great, I don't know, it's debatable, honestly.
Extremely debatable.
Yeah. Of course, you have stuff like the Butoden series, where the gimmick is just kicking people up to a different level. It looks great, sure, but like visually, like in terms of like the gameplay flow, that can put a real wrench into things.
How so?
Because you're basically taking a couple seconds to watch somebody float up to or down to a different level of the stage, moving from one screen to another. It's not exactly snappy.
All right, you got me. You got me. Let me ask you this. At the end of the day, do you feel like do you feel like it still has merit?
Sure. Wait, which one? I've listed a lot of stuff there.
I meant like when actually no, I was gonna say Hyperdimension really.
I mean, sure. There's something to sink your teeth into there.
I just kind of wanted to jump onto that one specifically because I'm just like, yeah, I just really like the art in that game. I really, really like the art in that game.
I mean, it is pretty. It's a pretty game. It's been lauded for it repeatedly. Whether or not it's like solid mechanically, that's up to you. It's okay.
All right,
I put some time into it. I think it's okay, but like I'd sooner tell you to play Legends than I would Hyperdimension. I'd tell you to play either before Butoden, but that's just me.
Damn, son, it's like that.
Wait, okay, look. When I say Legends, I don't mean like Legends of Goku. I mean there was a game for the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. Part of it is like Legends of such and such. I can't remember the name right now. I made a video about it and I can't remember the name because I'm terrible with names. But it's that game. Very interesting, sort of kind of like a team-based game if you want to set it up that way. But for the most part, it's just a solid, like multi-level fighting game. And it is a fighting game. It's not being repurposed as a game. It's Dragon Ball Z: The Legend, essentially. That's the English title that's most popular. And I think it's pretty good. Like, if I were to recommend something out of my pocket, not out of pocket. Sorry. If I were to recommend something that you may not have seen before that would be a good time, it would definitely be that. That's the one. Dragon Ball Z: The Legend.
All right. Well, in that case, so, like, do you think that series has... Okay, so when it comes to that series, So, like, faith adherence to source material is something we've been talking about with a lot of these licensed properties. In fact, it's kind of it's something you can't ignore. You could choose to ignore it, obviously, in the case of like the Blade and Fi's games for Kamen Rider and Ultraman. In some cases, you can for the sake of being a better game. But when it comes to Dragon Ball, what do you think is the ratio between faithfulness to the source material and trying to, and for the sake of fan service, and trying to be a good game?
Gosh. For a lot of people, they're one and the same. As far as the developer goes, I can't really get into their heads or say, oh yeah, these developers specifically thought of doing this or trying to be accurate for that or blah blah blah. But from what I've seen, the more you make out of what the series gives you, the better it's well received. Let me use Budokai as an example. One of the best things out of, for example, the Buu Saga is fusions. And this is something that in the story never actually did what it was supposed to do. Every time fusion was used, it failed in that story. But it's a neat idea. So, for example, in Budokai, it's something that's a factor. It's something that you can use as a super move. And then once you get your fused fighter, it's a potential momentum shift because the fused fighter is so much stronger in that form. That's something that they took advantage of and tried to put into the game as a concept, and it worked out pretty well. Tons of people love that stuff. Heck, speaking of fusions, you've got Dragon Ball fusions, or is it called Dragon Ball fusions or Dragon Ball Z fusions? You know what I mean. That 3DS game. Mm-hmm. They made an entire video game out of the idea. And people like it well enough. I think it's a solid game. And that's taking something from the series and trying to gamify it and turn it into something malleable. And it worked out really well.
Alright. So, the communities for Dragon Ball fighting games usually end up pretty much I wouldn't say. Would you argue that most of them are on the same page when it comes to a fighting game a Dragon Ball fighting game just being good and they can just play it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I can't speak for certain, but you don't see a lot of Dragon Ball fans of one game actively dismissing or trying to denigrate another game. There's a lot of overlap, I think, because from what I've seen, the primary draw for these games is the story, or the thing is based on Dragon Ball. People go in because it's a Dragon Ball game, and then they stick with what they like, but that's the main draw. So naturally, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of overlap. The people who are playing Super Dragon Ball Z are 9 times out of 10 the same people who have messed around with Budokai in the past or in the present. Same goes for Extreme Butoden, some of the older Butoden games, Hyper Dimension, that sort of thing. Lots of overlap. It just depends on whether or not any given person playing those games takes it seriously or not. To the point of practicing.
So, when it comes to making sure that you have when it comes to making sure that that a game is well received, do you think the level of attention they'll give to do you think Dragon Ball's one of those series where no matter what, the people making those games, you can expect them to keep that going for a little bit now in this day and age, in the case of Xenoverse still getting content, or in the case of Dragon Ball Fighters still getting updates and patches and new characters over the course of what has it been 5 years, is one of those things that Dragon Ball can just afford to do, since it's just it just makes that money.
Maybe, although that could be said of anything really. If something that's based off of an IP is popular, maybe they won't support that individual entry directly, but they'll definitely make a follow-up for as long as they can. That's how you ended up with like 6 or 7 Bleach games for major consoles.
That's fair. It's very fair. Well, I think that we've taken this about as far as we can with Dragon Ball, but on a more interesting note, when it comes to mechanical complexity, what are 3 games you can think of that go from the least mechanically complex, somewhere between, and the most mechanically complex you can allow that kind of game to be?
Oh, so we're just popping pop quizzes now, huh?
Just there's no wrong. No, because there's no wrong answer here.
All right, I'll play along with it.
Okay.
Okay, so is this just one specific series or anything that we've talked about so far?
Oh, Dragon Ball. We're talking about Dragon Ball.
Okay. All right. Well,
because Dragon Ball can afford to. We can, because Dragon Ball's big enough, and enough people will know what we're talking about, and you'll know what I'm talking about, and I'll know what you're talking about, to be able to have this discussion.
Well, obviously, at least it's going to be something that I'm just going to flat out say, and nobody will argue with me on. So the least complex is obviously the versus mode in Advanced Adventure.
Yeah.
That's number 1 with a bullet. I'd be surprised if anybody fought me on that one. I guess as far as like middle of the road goes, I suppose that like a lot of the stuff that came out in the 90s isn't that complex. Honestly, it's just a matter of how much you're willing to put up with. So like your Butodens, your Hyperdimensions, Butoden especially, because heck, the most complicated thing about those games is that a lot of the times the screen splits in half and you're on 2 different sides of the map.
Oh. Where would the Supersonic Warriors games fit into this?
They are still fighting games, for sure.
I mean, in terms of complexity.
About that but they're about that speed, yeah. I'd say they're in the middle. Like most of the they're not bad games. They are unique games in the sense that most of the conceit of those games is around the flying. So like it's understandable why it got backlash back then, but they're not bad. But I wouldn't say they're particularly complex either. You just got to get the hang of it. Like it's not that hard.
All right, now where do you put the most complex mechanically?
Look, I'm going to tell you right now. Most complex mechanically, it's got to be like at least a tie between DBFZ and Super Dragon Ball. Because I've been trying to play Super Dragon Ball for about a year and a half now, and I still don't feel like I'm anywhere near good enough to understand it.
Okay, now this is the part where I have to bring in this discussion, the important part. Now, the reason why I've structured it this way is because, at the end of the day, does complex equal enjoyable or good?
I don't want to use weasel words, so I'm not going to say it's up to everyone's individual preference. What I will say is that it's a lot easier to get burnt out on a simple game than it is on a complex game. It's kind of like Akatsuki Blitzkampf. Lots of people respect it. It's a simple game to understand. That's one of the selling points of it. But not everybody sticks with it when they understand it. And part of that is because of its simplicity. It's a double-edged sword. It's easy to understand, it's easy to get into, but it's also easy to feel like you know everything about it even when you don't. So a lot of people either drop it or leave it as a side game that they don't put too much thought into. And I'm guilty of that. That's how I know it happens, because I've done it. I know a lot of people who've done it. It's just kind of like one of those things that happens, especially now when we're like in a wealth of fighting games. We've had a weird little renaissance again. You're tempted to try the new stuff, and sometimes things have to fall to the wayside.
And I believe that is the mission statement of looking through these, especially now more than ever, or talking about these licensed titles, because it's not really a question of whether it's mechanically complex or even like, is it competitive, the real question I want to get into is, will the people that get into this, or into these games, that are based off the things that we like, do they have what it takes to sustain us if we keep putting our time into them and invest them? Or are they just going to have us burn out because there's almost nothing there to get into?
Well, that's your plan. Listen, people, you didn't actually explain most of this to me. I'm being held hostage here. See? They heard that. Now they're mad at you.
Oh, you motherfucker. That goddamn biker, he keeps... I swear.
Don't say anything detailed. That's doxing.
Okay. That one angry biker who's a fan of multiple intellectual properties that we happen to be talking about.
Right.
It's just fucking me over. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. So, on that regard, that gets to the heart of the matter what I'm talking about. Because, if you're going to get into something, it's way easier than... What are you more likely to get into? A property you have no familiarity with, and could probably be something you'd either hate or just feel alienated by? Or are you going to go for the thing that you know? Obviously, you're going to go for the thing you know. And if it's based off of something you especially like, you're definitely going to go for it.
Right.
And if that's the case, if we're going to have something like that, and companies who have made incredible fighting games put the money, put the time, and most of all, put the love. I'm going to be that guy right now and put the love into making something with all their heart. Then we have to be willing to understand what we're talking about when we say, I don't know if this has a competitive edge to it. Because what we're really trying to say is, I don't know if this is the kind of thing. I don't know if this has the kind of meat on it that can sustain the kinds of interactions I want to have with other people. Where I play it, I investigate it, I learn it, I discover it, and new things are constantly happening as I do it. Either innovating on it, honing new skills from it, that give me a myriad of positive feelings, or anything there, or anything beyond that.
It's an interesting way to put it. I can tell you put a lot of thought into it. I guess I'd agree. You mentioning like IP and established developers going in on it reminds me that we're kind of. I wouldn't say we're in a period where IP. Where fighters based on existing IP is like prevalent. But we're coming out of that period where a good chunk of what we were looking at in terms of new releases were based on something, right? Like, we had a burst of that back when games were relatively easy to develop and make, and we had a lot of clones, or we had a lot of games that were like crammed into the tournament fighter scene based on existing popular fictional shows. Now that game development is a bit more prohibitive in terms of cost, that kind of slowed down, but we did have a burst of it back in the 2010s, especially from Bandai Namco. They were ruthless with it. How many arena fighters did we end up with by the end of the decade from them alone?
Good lord. It's gone. You can't even count it on your fingers and toes.
Right. So, at the time I was a little worried that more and more fighting developers were going to more and more developers are going to make fighting games based on something that existed instead of making something new. I was half right. Mostly we're getting fighting games based on pre-existing original IP. Not necessarily always anime or manga or movies or that sort of thing. So it's something to consider when you get more games made based on a popular TV show or book or something like that. That's going to happen a lot more often because that's still like something that developers are more willing to take a risk on. Not everybody's going to go and support like the brand new IP, even if it's coming from a developer with a lot of history behind it. But people will definitely flock to a game based on something that they know, or a game featuring a character that they know, or multiple characters that they know. Like, it's a lot more appealing for an investor or a developer to go in on Jump Versus than they would with a new BlazBlue game. Or, actually, what would fit in? What's the last new fighting game IP we've had?
Skullgirls?
Skullgirls. I guess that is the last and newest one. Huh. Yeah.
What about Punch Planet?
Oh, yes, no, and... Sorry, yes, no, what am I thinking? There's plenty of new IP. Punch Planet. Oh, gosh. What's that one with, like, the gem in the logo?
Battlecore?
No, not Battlecore.
There is those... I give up? I think that speaks to what we're talking about.
Oh, but yeah, no, it's easier to pitch, like, Fight of Gods or Fight of Animals. Sorry, it's easier to pitch a new, like, Bleach game or a new crossover game or, like, a tie-in to the hottest new anime or, like, a UFC game than it is to, like, pitch, hey, you know, why don't you check out Fight of Animals? Why don't you check out Fight of Gods? Why don't you check out Punch Planet? Why don't you check out Pocket Fighter? What about Pocket Bravery? I think was one of them. I'm only pausing because it's on the tip of my tongue. It starts with an A, but, like, gosh, I just can't remember what it's called. This is gonna bug me. This is really gonna bug me. Arcus Chroma. That's the one. That's the one. Arcus Chroma came out about a couple years ago. There's a guy I know called King Scarab. He's done videos on it repeatedly. It looks like a great game. But yeah, like, that's an indie thing. I wouldn't expect to see that published by a big name developer anytime soon. But you know, I'm just bringing all of this stuff about established properties versus new properties to say that, like, we had a trend of, like, licensed games going down, and now they're coming back. It's in flux, you know. Like, the more comfortable developers seem to get with, like, a certain level of graphical fidelity and, like, mechanical complexity, the more likely you are to get, like, a game thrown out there to benefit a show by becoming, like, some sort of tie-in rather than, like, you know, an original fighting game. But, you know, that's understandable, I guess. You know, fighting games are niche. It's not exactly the sort of thing you just jump into with both feet anymore. I can get it. I just think that, you know, we had a rough spot where we were getting more licensed games than original games, even in the indie scene. And I'm glad we've kind of come out on the other side of that, and now it's kind of like an even mix now.
All right. Speaking of even mix, we've got, well, actually not so much of an even mix. It's more like, I don't want to say a monopoly, but this series that we're looking at now, this other one, is pretty much two big studios have worked on the games for this one. It's Naruto, and it's aiding in CyberConnect 2. Those are the big ones. Can you think of any other studio that worked on as many Naruto fighting games? Or even any aside from these?
Who made the Ultimate games?
The what?
Ultimate games. Ultimate
You
Ninja.
mean like Naruto Ultimate Ninja?
Yes.
CyberConnect 2.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's pretty much it, isn't it?
Holy shit! Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Like, obviously, should we count fan stuff? I don't think we should count fan stuff.
Well, no. Otherwise, this video would be way longer than it already is. Let's see. Developed by CyberConnect 2. Yeah, no. It's aiding in CyberConnect 2. Man, this is probably, like, the easiest one to go over. Considering.
Pretty much.
Alright, so, like, fucking, I'm familiar with it. You're familiar with it. Ah! I'm looking at the screen right now. I'm looking at you. Am I allowed to say? Ah!
I'll edit it in post.
Can you? Oh no! Like I'm looking at you, audience. You've probably played a Naruto game by either of these companies. There's no way you haven't. As like no like if it's a fighting game and it's Naruto, it's them. There's no one else. And most importantly, you know what the fuck we're gonna be talking about for the most part, kind of maybe, you know, unless you've been out of the loop for some reason for some odd years. But
hold on, wait a minute.
Oh?
What is Boruto? What is Shinobi Striker?
Okay, Shinobi Striker. If it's gonna be CyberConnect 2 or kind of
No, it's not CyberConnect 2. Would you count that? Because that is more of an action game than a dedicated one-on-one fighting game. But
well, does it have a versus mode?
You can fight people, but I'm not sure that's a versus mode.
Well, then don't count it.
I mean, it's about as much of a fighting game. See, this is where like genre classification gets sticky.
A bit sticky.
Yeah, you could look at it as a fighting game. There's PvP, but it's more of a online experience thing.
Maybe.
Feel like on principle I have to count it, and if I'm gonna count it, that one was made by a company named Soleil or something like that. So okay. That's one game that has nothing to do with CyberConnect or ATIC.
Was it good?
Boy, that is a hard thing to answer. I know for a fact that it's got its fans and it's got its detractors. I think more like because it's such an online heavy thing. Like I think there's like single player that's offline, but like a big chunk of it is supposed to be like playing with other people, and a good chunk of it is like online based. And as a consequence of that, right? Like because the game wasn't exactly like maintained very well, I'm tempted to say no, it's not a good game. But like mechanically, sure, it's alright. And they still update it, they just don't do a good job of like being communicative with people.
Okay. Well, we'll have to include that. We'll have to put that there for obvious reasons. That's something. That's something, alright. Is it a good something? Good question. I don't know. Only thing I can think of to mention is like, I guess, I got nothing on the Striker series. Wait, it's only one game, right?
Yeah, it's only one game.
Oh, okay. Look, I'm just going to put that to the side, alright? And I don't think anyone's going to hold that against me. Alright? Alright, let's focus here. So, what we're looking at is, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at 2 decades of 2 companies working on a fighting game fighting games for one series.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's 20 years.
Basically.
Do you want to... Let's split this down. I'm gonna be fast and loose with this one, okay?
Uh-huh.
You ready?
Uh-huh.
You ready? You ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so does it nail the aesthetic of the series? Does it get what? Does it translate and communicate exactly who this is for? And when you play it, you're like, yeah, I'm a fan of Naruto. This is exactly for me, right? Does it?
I would say yes, but with a caveat for the second one. Like, it's supposed to be a mass appeal game. It's not. It's not really for anybody. It's just there for fans of the series, or anybody with two.
It succeeds in
or
that.
anybody with 2 eyeballs.
Okay, so it succeeds in that endeavor.
Basically,
it looks good. It sounds good. It nails the look of the anime / manga. It presentation wise, you could do worse.
I guess, except I don't hear anybody bumping Naruto Hero tracks in the streets. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fair. But do they do that for Gekto Ninja Taisen?
Of course.
Yes, of course they do. Of course they do.
What's that one in front of the gates at night, with the cherry blossom leaves, petals falling all over the place.
Damn it! Okay, hang on. I have to pull that up. What you talking about?
Constant. I used to hear it. People put it into their MP3 mixes a lot.
Are you fucking kidding me? That's how. Okay, so we have to talk about the fact that this was also a key factor in helping Naruto's popularity, right?
To an extent, yeah, and outside of Japan.
Because those were really fucking good games, and you got to do the cool shit you saw in the anime.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's not beat around the bush here. I'm not saying that without these, Naruto wouldn't be extremely popular. What I am saying is, out of a good number of properties next to Dragon Ball, it wasn't that hard to convince people to bring those games over here to the West.
It was hard.
I mean, except for 4.
I mean, you saw what happened with the English.
Yeah, okay.
You saw what happened with Clash of Ninja.
Nah, you got me. You fucking got me. You're right, actually. Because Gekto Ninja Taisen 4 never came here.
Never mind 4 or 3. They skipped...
Or the games for the Wii.
They skipped the last 2 GameCube games and they just, futzed around with, the Wii ones.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah, I forgot. There was that... Naruto did dip in popularity significantly as time went on.
Yeah. I mean, it dipped right around the time, right up until Viz made that weird break to try and get caught up as soon as possible.
Oh, no.
Did you know about that?
Why did they do that? No, go. Fill me in.
Well, basically, the series was winding up, so they're like, okay, look. Interest has waned significantly. Nobody's cool with the idea of being stuck multiple years behind in the Japanese releases. So we'll just get caught up now. And so they turned Shonen Jump into the Naruto and One Piece book, essentially. Multiple volumes coming up back to back to back to back to back. As soon as they could.
Those motherfuckers, how could they?
They had to. I don't blame them. It was kind of like an event back then. It's like, oh man, they're trying to get caught up. How are we going to keep up with all these volume releases?
Dirty motherfuckers. Dirty motherfuckers. How could they? Hurts my balls. Does it hurt your balls?
No. I was there.
Of course it does.
It was fun.
It was a good time, huh? Just like those games. Alright, so that's a 3D fighter, right? We don't have to dance around this like we do with Climax Fighters?
Well, no, we didn't have to dance around that either. I couldn't remember sidestepping much in the very first game, but after a while, yeah, you just sidestep.
Yeah, just get in there. You're in there. You're getting in there. Alright, so it was fast. It was fluid. The animations were nice. They were reused assets, especially from other games, like Bloody Roar. But, mechanically speaking, no. Let's also include Ultimate Ninja Storm, because the games by CyberConnect 2 had you just moving around in a full 3D space. They had online, right?
I think some of them did. I don't remember if all of them did.
Which is something G&T and even the Wii aiding games didn't have, right? The Wii game did not have online, right?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. Not too familiar with playing those games on their original hardware.
You know what? That's fair. and that's mostly because, as we've stated, the only way you can play these is either importing them or emulating them after a certain point for the aiding games.
Mm.
But Ultimate Ninja Storm, yeah, what is it? How many? What are the? Is Ultimate Ninja the name of all of the games that CyberConnect 2 worked under, made for Bandai Namco for their, I want to say, tenure for their time with them?
Suppose so, yeah. Like, Ultimate Ninja Storm is everything they made that was in full free roam 3D.
Okay.
I think, as far as, like, the, Gekto Ninja Tyson EX series goes, I know for a fact that the very last one had online play. But I can't speak for the other ones, honestly. So weird that they got the entire series that's just completely Japan exclusive.
Understandable. It's not understandable, but regardless.
You know, did you know that in the second one in that sub-series, you could do hand signs?
How?
Yeah, like, if you dodge... Sorry, like, you can enter a stance, right? You hold down the dodge button and the throw button. And then you move the Wii Remote and the nunchuck in 3 different directions, and then you get a boost.
Oh, okay.
But if you're too low on chakra, you enter a stun state instead.
Okay, so this game had... Now, was Ultimate Ninja competitive?
Yes, without a doubt. People made it competitive, and they didn't take much...
Okay, what was your connection to the series as it was developing this competitive scene?
Well, you know, everybody who knew of it and was a big fan of Naruto played it back then.
Okay.
You know, the fact that it had 4-player multiplayer certainly didn't hurt.
Oh, shit. I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah, that's a big part of it.
How well could those games run, like, performance-wise, when it did that?
The only time there was slowdown was when multiple people were doing multiple graphic-intensive things at once.
You know, I think I can appreciate the fact that while they made these games, and while you could argue some of them are less... are way easier to burn out on than others. Like, they just don't have anything going for them past a certain point. You're like, all right, I'll move on to the next thing. I'm glad they bothered to make them run at 60 frames. Sorry, tried to make them run at a consistent frame rate. And actually work. I mean, granted, you know, I feel like that's silly to say, but considering what we're talking about here, it's, what are these, like, rosters with how many different characters?
Doing
how many different things?
Dozens.
Like, you know, you gotta be able to, it doesn't hurt to be a little bit impressed by the technical work going on here. I'm not gonna say they're wizards. Actually, they might be, in some cases, considering how fast they were able to put those out. Even if they were reusing assets. Even in the case of Gekta Ninja Tyson. It's like, oh. It's crazy to think about. That being the case, I think it's, you know, I don't want to just dog on Ultimate Ninja, but in the competitive scene, what ended up burning out more quickly? Or what ends up burning out more quickly? The aiding games, or what we see with Ultimate Ninja, with CyberConnect 2?
You know, I don't remember Ultimate Ninja lasting long, but technically, since it just moved over to Ninja Storm, to the Storm games, I think it would be more fair to say that those games kind of picked up the torch.
Okay.
And in that case, they've definitely had a long competitive scene under the radar in some cases. There are plenty of people who will swear by those games.
Alright then. And what about you? What did you end up getting burned out on?
I didn't burn out on anything, I just stopped. there's only so much time in the day. There was a point where I had to pick between trying to get into the Clash of Ninja series or picking up Ultimate Muscle Grand Prix 2, and I made my choice.
Ooh. We'll talk about that, because that was Kinnikuh Man's the last thing we'll be talking about tonight. Okay, so in that case, putting that all together, how do you feel about Eighting's work on Gekta Ninja Tyson compared to the other licensed works that they've done, including the ones we've talked about in this video?
Gosh. I'd say it's some of their best work, honestly. Like, just in terms of, like, the initial concept. It's so strong that the fact that most of the games, of like, a good chunk of the games were revisions is fine. Because it's revising something that's a great idea. Not just the fact that it's a decent Naruto game, but the fact that they managed to make a dual-faceted game where it can be a one-on-one, or it can be multiple players fighting on teams, or a free-for-all. Like, just the game itself, like, the initial game is solid. And then on top of that, you're making all of these additions. You're trying something new every time. You're trying to either refine it or to add some goofy Wii-specific gimmick in the case of some of the later ones. And, I can appreciate that. I think it's their most robust it's their most robust attempt at making something based on an existing IP. That's my idea. That's how I see it. And more so than the Bleach games. I think they did the Bleach games. Think they did the Bleach games?
Okay.
I think they did the Bleach games. I'd have to go look that up. I don't remember too much about Heat the Soul, but I think they were with the ones who worked on it. More so than that, more so than the Kamen Rider games, I think really it's some of their standout work, only behind, like, Bloody Roar, really. Well, that's just me. And I know that there are scenes for it because I see people, like, representing that series with netplay tourneys and whatnot to this day. And cool. Interesting mods.
So, like, that's probably the one that you can think of out of all of these where you're like, yeah, no, that's a pretty healthy community fucking around with it.
Yeah.
To this day. Even when the developers have, like, pieced out and done other things, they're still going to be pretty alright.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Pretty much.
Like, I don't think anybody's going back to GNT1, right?
Probably not. Not the game with 8 characters.
Fuck, man, I always forget that it's just 8 characters. Holy shit.
They made it as quickly as they could.
Man. What is some of your fondest memories playing GNT?
Oh, it was a...
and Ultimate Ninja Storm.
Same thing, pretty much. Getting together with people I knew and, goofing around, trying to get us... trying to break the game as much as possible, basically.
Alright, what's a highlight you remember of, like, a match you had?
I remember playing a match wherein I was using Sasuke. And
okay.
I zoned out 2 different people with Shuriken. I don't know how they didn't just run up to me and goof around, because one was playing the puppet character and the other one had...
Kankuro?
Yes. And the other one had Rock Lee. Either one of them could have just run up and punched me. But instead, they, like, tried to inch in closer to me with, like, side steps and jumps and all this other stuff, and I just swat them out of the air. It was hilarious.
Damn, that's pretty good. Nice. Well, we've gotten that out of the way. That one was, like I said, that was pretty easy to talk about. Now, most important, we've come to the 5th franchise to talk about. I want to point out that I had no real specific order in mind when I listed those 5 at the beginning of the video. Maybe I should have stuck to that order. But I went off of what I put down on a list that I'm reading off of. So that's kind of where we're at with that one. So now it's time to focus on a series that a good number of people, more people now know more about now than they did before, which makes this a lot easier for us to discuss than since the last time you made a video on the franchise on one of the installments for the PS2, or actually one game for the PS2 for one of your Fighting Gyms videos,
right?
And that is Kinnikuman. I love it with all my heart. You love it with all your heart, I assume.
Well, there's a muscle involved. It's probably my heart. Might be as my spleen. Maybe a liver? I don't know.
Alright, so most people know this as Ultimate Muscle, and also the muscle toys that came over here.
I don't know about that. Like, that's kind of dating our audience if that's the case. Those came out a long time ago.
You know, that's a fair point. But yeah, a good number of people know. I have some familiarity with it on some level. That's what I'm getting at. Alright, so the Kinnikuman anime is one of those things. It's like, I don't know where to begin, because that series has been getting fighting games for a very long time. But is fighting game the right word? Because a good of them are more wrestling games than fighting games.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. You'd be surprised. It's more like 50-50 at this point.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, deadass.
A lot of them are fighting games, and because of that, they're not great. Because, everything kind of has to end in like a hit throw or a throw. There's not a lot of character variety.
Okay, so first things first. We're not including Muscle Fight.
We're not including Muscle Fight.
Because I feel like that's fair. I know that didn't need to be said.
No, it needed to be said.
But I had to get that out of
the... to be said.
Okay.
Because I'm sure they're... Look.
That game's... People treat that game like it's almost... Like... What's the best way to put it? It's like... That game's... That people look at me and they look at that game, and I like that game a lot, myself. But they look at me, and they look at that game, and they go, that shit's 3/4 official, motherfucker. And I'm like, no! It can't! No! Stop! Which I think speaks to its quality. The Muscle Fighter, of course, is a Fighter Maker game. Made way... But like, how long ago was that made?
Oh, I wouldn't know myself.
Oh, that thing's ancient now. It's actually been like a decade and some change. I don't even know if they're still working on it. Whoever was working on it. But it's neat. Find some way to fucking play it. I don't know. Go over there. Now, let's see, what is it? So from the 90s? No, from the 80s to now. Kinnikuman, depends. It gets something every now and again. There's a mobile game. So,
I thought that mobile game was
for fighting
done.
Games. Oh, the mobile games. Okay. So for the fighting games, we have... You can count them on your fingers, right?
I mean, there are more than 10, I think.
You can count them all on your fingers and toes, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Now, it's important to remember here. Is it also 50-50 on whether or not they have a competitive... You can approach them competitively.
Well, if we're going by the idea that competitive means there's more than, like, rock, papers...
Oh, yeah, sorry. My bad. We'll use the nomenclature I was referring to before, I think, is the right word.
Okay.
People can invest time in them. The burnout is not... There's not a palpable sense of burnout.
No. Most of them are not. I can tell you for a fact because I played most of them and I got burnt out pretty quickly. Like,
okay, so
what was it? The Dream Fight? I made a video on the Dream Fight a couple months ago.
The Game
Boy game.
Which ended with you just vehemently going, I have nothing better to do. I can't leave my fucking house. I'm stuck playing. I don't like this.
Pretty much.
Okay. That one plays like a Street Fighter game, right? Esque.
It plays like a Street Fighter Game Boy port, specifically.
Okay. Alright. We're gonna throw that out of there. No, ain't nobody fucking with that. Does it even have link cable connect, like,
I have no idea. I don't think so.
Okay.
Wouldn't they have put something like that on the box?
You wouldn't have found... You don't want to find out, do you?
I'm really not interested.
Yeah, okay. So, moving on.
I mean, we're kind
there,
of skipping one, aren't we? There's like Dirty Fight.
The Super Nintendo
Yeah.
game? That's what I was going to talk
Oh,
about.
okay. I thought that came out before.
Yeah, well, fuck. Well, it was going to get talked about regardless, so... Alright, Dirty Fight. So, like, what was the new hotness at the time? What, like... That was Scramble for the Throne, right? That was the final arc at that point.
I think so. Although, I guess technically
Yeah,
the new hotness was that Ramen Man show.
Oh, wait, I thought that came out in the 90s, though.
Didn't,
The game and the Scramble for the Throne arc. I thought Tatakai Ramen Man came out in 1980. It came out before Fist of the North Star. Here, I'm gonna check, in fact. Tatakai Ramen Man, 1982 to 1989. Go on.
Yeah, wait a minute. No, there was a gap for the Scramble for the Throne arc. That came out in the 90s.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So Dirty Fight came out in the 90s.
Right. Right, so technically the new
after
the new hotness would have still been Ramen Man because that show didn't start out. Whatever. I'm getting into the minutia here.
Wait. Go on. No. That show didn't went out.
Like, people had to remember that it like was there for a second because like they took a huge gap between the last arc and Scramble for the Throne.
Yeah, you're right.
Although technically the movies were still coming out, but that was still like what 5-6 years before the TV show came back.
All right. Wait, is Dirty Fight based off Scramble for the Throne?
I think so.
Okay. So, what's the system here? You put the time in. What was it like? What's it got going for it?
It's not great. It's stiff.
Hit or miss?
It's a miss. Or was it Dirty Challenger?
I guess he...
See, I don't even care. I care so little I don't even care about like the title, Dirty Challenger.
Okay. Do these basically just be middling to forgettable until we get to the 2000s?
I would say all the wrestling games are fine, but like...
Okay, so then let's get at the heart of it. One company is known for making Kinnikuman memorable as a series of video games and fighting games. And we know who those are, don't we?
Maybe?
Well, obviously, it's none other than the big Aki Corporation.
You said it again! I'm gonna have to put in the Minecraft sound effect. We're gonna edit that out.
Can it be the Wario? Can it be any Wario sound?
Fine.
Like, can it be different Wario sounds?
Maybe. I'll consider it.
Okay.
But yeah, no. Aki kind of like did a really good number on it. Obviously, there was the Nisei / Ultimate Muscle game they made for the GameCube. I think that was them. And, what did they bring it over? What did they bring the PS2 game over as? Ultimate Muscle featuring Galactic Wrestling?
I think so.
Still decent.
Oh, hey, there was the NES game from the 80s. We forgot to mention that. It's okay.
Yeah, it's alright.
It's alright. Came to America as
Muscle. MUSCLE.
Muscle. Go. Fight.
Did they use the same song?
Yes, they did. They used Hono no Kinnikuman.
Okay, good. At least there's some synergy there.
Oh, yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Yakten fighter. And now I'm gonna move on. That's a good song, but more importantly, Aki Corporation put time in. We'll leave the big one that you did the video on for last.
Okay.
Now I've got to turn to the audience. All right, get ready. If you don't like the words peak fiction, raw, goat, fire, then click out of this video, because those are gonna come up like about 50 times in here, man. I'm talking like full on like unleashed fire. The muscle curtain is up, raised. I took off the armor and fucking I'm on some Robin Mass type shit. I threw it just right into the sun.
We're gonna get sued for copyright for gimmick infringement here.
Okay. So like, those games the Aki games are really good.
I think every single one of them has at least a little merit. I think they're all great, honestly.
They're all really good, and they capture, like, if you're going into it, even if you don't even know what Kinnikuman is, you like it. You can like it.
Right.
It's hard. It has, like, if you're a wrestling fan, you'll enjoy it, because they'll put in shit from, like, because Aki they're the wrestling they are the wrestling video game developer. Unless I'm thinking of somebody else.
No, they're considered some of the best.
If not the best.
Yeah.
Which makes this kind of weird, because then you go, well, those are wrestling games. Those aren't fighting games. You can't get approach that with the same kind of competitive edge, or like the same kind of like investment that you could for other kinds of fighting games. And to that I say, that's where we're going to talk about the other Aki games. We're going to focus on the ones mostly pertaining to the ones that just play like tag team.
Honestly,
wrestling fighters.
That's not entirely true. Like,
oh, go on.
You know, there are people who still mess around. There was definitely a No Mercy scene back when that game came out.
Yeah.
Same thing goes with what little time Galactic Wrestling featuring Ultimate Muscle had in the sun, aka Kinnikuman Generations.
So, I ask again for this particular moment, what was your connection to these games going in? You know, the ones, you know, the Galactic Wrestling, the Ultimate Muscle Generations game.
Well, I mean, they did their job. They were there to push the show, and they pushed the show. Everybody I knew who was interested in Ultimate Muscle gave Galactic Wrestling a shot if they could. Same thing goes with the Ultimate Muscle game on the GameCube, which is a different thing, technically.
Okay, so, you know, can you approach that with like a kind of like fighting simulator approach that you could with other Aki Corporation games?
Not really, because you don't build a character. You are playing with established characters with established move lists. It's more like a traditional wrestling game, really.
Okay, and that's not to its detriment.
It's not to its detriment. It's perfectly fine. That's what helps make people like more interested, especially people who know the series. Like,
okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, you have a set move list, you can improve, you know your character's limits, you're trying to do something. It's a little loosey-goosey, admittedly, because they wanted to make it faster than their traditional, the stuff they had made before. So instead of a more realistic bent with weight and a lot of heft to their moves, characters are just kind of doing stuff, you know? Like Brocken Jr. is just flying all over the place with drop kicks and bounding off the rope to go for head scissors. And there's a lot of speedy movement and side steps and free roam and all this other stuff. So it's a lot more kinetic. And because it's the same system that Aki uses all the time, that increased speed kind of makes it look a little janky. So to an extent, some people think that the Kinnikuman Generations games are a little like off kilter. But I think they're great.
Okay. So, now we're going to be focusing on the last two games that they ever worked on for Kinnikuman?
So far, yeah.
Okay. And so far there's never been another title for something like this. Another title for the franchise since that's either been as good or even just existed as a fighting game for it. Like, there's no other there's no fighting games for this after this point, right?
Pretty much.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about the GOAT, the raw fire duology that is Kinnikuman Muscle Grand Prix. Oh, to be fair, I've never played Muscle Grand Prix 1, but I've only played Grand Prix 2, Tokumori Max.
It's more or less what you'd expect, just a lot rougher around the edges. Camera angles are admittedly worse, you know.
Okay. So, for one thing, I've played this. You have obviously been not just a fan of the series longer than me, but you coming in as, what's your connection to it? What'd you go in for it? To it for? You know, what was your journey through it, especially after you made that video?
Not much to say. You know, I saw people playing it in Japanese arcades and it looked neat. I got a copy for myself, although I understand that it's not exactly the same game. I used to bring it to locals back when I went to locals and encourage people to give it a shot. Some did. Admittedly, some did. Other people were like, oh man, you know, this is just some weird game that, like, this guy spent a whole, like, who knows how long sweating over. I'm not going to give it a shot. So, you know, mixed results. But for the most part, I was pretty satisfied. More people were willing to play Muscle Grand Prix 2 than they were Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown or Darkstalkers, I'll tell you that much.
I have to think about that for a moment. Really, really soak that in. Fuck. Okay. That being the case, it's a pretty accessible game, right? Like, even if you don't know what you're doing, you're still having fun.
Pretty much.
Cool. Like, that's one of those things where, like, the investment after a certain point is just, man, just fire that shit up. It's not even a problem. And then, you know, when you want to go, like, but how about I deal with this competitively? Or how about I get in there, really see what I can do against other people? Interesting things can happen. For better or for worse, it's something you can really dig into and come out of it going, you know what? I can see my progress getting better at that game. Or just go, you know, that was, or just go, all right, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just put some time into this. Fuck it, why not? I'll just do a tourney. I don't even care if I win. I like the game that you can just like it and just go into it for that.
Mm.
So, even if you don't know who the Kinnikuman characters are from original Kinnikuman, they've gotten pretty much all the important characters you could ask for from Ultimate Muscle, right?
Essentially. Well, yeah. Not in, well, actually, in Kinnikuman Muscle Grand Prix 1 and 2, yes, mostly in 2.
Okay. Because 2 adds more characters.
Yes.
And, you know, as a single-player experience, would you say it's still a good time?
Yes. It's for the most part. Like, you're not going to get any detailed story stuff, honestly, but, like, you know, just having, like... The thing about it is, there's so much detail in the game itself that playing against the CPU, you can still see something goofy every now and then. Because, you know, there are little things here and there, like character and moment-specific references that are thrown into the game. Like, I know the one thing that scared people away, but that I personally love, is that, like, if you do a counter against 2 characters that have history together, you'll get a little scenelet of the initial, like, exchange of blows that happened in the series. So, for example, if you are playing Kinnikuman and your opponent is Buffalo Man, and you hit him with the Kinniku Buster, instead of just going for the counter animation, which is where the characters brace up.
Oh, Barry Freeman?
No. Buffalo Man.
Oh, I thought you said Buff Old Man.
No, Buffalo Man.
Holy fuck.
Right, so if you go for the counter, instead of doing the generic counter animation, which is, the throw break, instead of doing the generic throw break animation where they brace up and the character being thrown knocks the arms off of the character making the throw and, like, flexes a little bit, it'll go into the animation, and then suddenly Buffalo Man will do the 6-9 counter that he does in the manga. So the thing about that is, it's a great reference, The other thing that some people don't like is that it's a full reference, which means that you get damage off of it.
Oh no! So this is getting back to that thing I mentioned about adherence to source material and mechanical, actually being able to play the game, huh?
Pretty much. Like, on paper, it's no different than, say, having, like, an increased gravity value for a character in, say, an air dasher or something like that.
Okay.
But it can be off-putting. I know that much. Some people are like, that's stupid. Why would you actually put that in there? You devoted time and resources into replicating something that's a character-specific advantage in a matchup. That's inane.
But then, how do you avoid that?
You avoid it by not doing it, but that's not as fun.
True.
There is no greater pop
that
I've ever seen than the handful of times I've shown some of that stuff to people, and they're like, "Oh, that's in there?"
Damn. Like, I'm beginning to remember what you're talking about too. And yet, I still want to put my time into playing.
Yep.
Like, I hear that and I go, nice. Maybe that's just because it's Kineko Man. Maybe I'm just a bit of a bitch.
No need to be self-appreciating here. We're all Kineko Man fans, all two of us.
It's just, I don't know. There's something I have to respect. No, not respect, but there's something about it that that's just... I can't dismiss it as me just not wanting to play the game altogether when that happens. It's just like, oh, yeah. Oh, that's something. That really is something. You can, but like you can still do other kinds of command grabs on him, though, right?
Of course. It's only one counter.
Yeah. Wait, does it happen automatically, or does the player have to do the input?
You have to do the input. Otherwise, you have to do it. You have to break the throw, or otherwise it just goes through.
Oh, so that's how you get the counter.
Yeah.
Oh, well then that's perfectly fine. You still have to do it. You still have to remember that you do it or know to do it.
Right.
That's still good. In either case, the fact that Aki could be able to do that, do all of these things, with like little to no experience with a game that's quote unquote traditional fighter, is something to commend. As you've stated before, they to quote you, what's the word? Something along the lines of, I think it went something along the lines of, oh, Aki used one simple trick that doctors hate. And it succeeded. It was great. Looking back on it now, you haven't changed your opinion since then, right?
No, I haven't.
So as far as licensed games go, for Kineko Man, spotty history, but a pretty solid landing nonetheless, if that's to be the last game it ever gets.
Pretty much.
I hope it's not, but regardless, there's still a healthy amount of people giving it the time of day, right?
Yeah, it still has its fans. There's a couple of people who keep up with the game, try and run things online. Obviously, we get tourneys at a few game centers in Japan on the original version of 2, and that goes over pretty well.
And that's and you consider that a testament to its legacy as a piece of peak fiction.
Actually, if I remember correctly, I think the GameCube one was the first one of the wrestling games. Just to be clear.
Oh, okay.
And then it moved over to the PS2, and it took out the create a character mode.
Oh, okay.
It is what it is.
Suppose so.
Oh, You know what? Never mind.
Also, the music is fire for Grand Prix 2. Right?
Oh yeah, it's real catchy stuff.
Would you say it's befitting of one of the GOAT? That is Kinnikuman?
Maybe.
I mean, fuck, man. Kinnikuman's incorporated pretty much everything here of the things we've talked about. Or it's in either referenced in or is a part of things we've talked about in this video. Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Dragon Ball, Naruto, Kinnikuman. I mean, sorry. I was reading off the list, and I guess you could also take that as it being self-referential, which it is, if you include Nisei. But yeah, no, there's elements of this that weave in and out of the other things we've talked about. You know, Kinnikuman being an homage to Ultraman, elements of Kamen Rider. You know, there's parts of it that would go on to influence Dragon Ball significantly. Things that from this series that Dragon Ball, without it, Dragon Ball just wouldn't be the same. I mean, Naruto fucking loves that Mount Rushmore shit.
Yeah, and it's thanks to Kinnikuman we have power levels.
Whether we love him or hate him, which it handles in a way that not many other series try to do. Where it's just like, yeah, no, we're gonna be a little weird with this. Just bear with that. But that's a story for another day. I think we've covered all we can for this. Obviously, you can play the Kinnikuman games on. You can emulate it. It's not that hard to do. Net play is another problem entirely. But if there's anything we missed on that, anything we could have gotten wrong, let us know in the comments. But yeah, no, I think this has been very interesting to see play out between the two of us from either side. Either me still being young and getting into it, and you, while not old, you've definitely been there almost since the beginning of the 2000s anyway.
Who's been where? What? I don't understand. Where am I?
Look, all I'm saying is they're not gonna pull a picture of you up out at like what Evo 1999, and you're just there in the background. Just being like, yeah, get him. Huh. Well, care to give your closing thoughts?
Well, this has been a really weird exercise because it feels like we're dancing around the idea that you can pretty much make any game competitive if you're willing to like just have an agreement to adhere to a set of rules, a format, pretty much anything, and put your heart on the line for it.
Yeah.
But
there's also got to be.
Go on.
But there's also got to still be meat there at the end of the day.
Yeah, I suppose so. You can't just make like a competitive Rakuga Kids circuit. I mean, you could. It's not bereft of like merit, but like you're gonna get burnt out pretty quickly because there's not much there compared to say anything that already does have a turning circuit.
And that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you shouldn't approach it with that mindset, or you're gonna get burned out. Sorry, or you're not gonna be happy after a while.
You could be happy. It's just it's gonna be niche, incredibly niche. Like the Rakuga Kids community, I'm sure is like 1,000 strong, but like actually playing repeated circuits for it, that's kind of asking a lot, I think. For all I know, it's a solved game, and maybe that's why nobody does it.
Who's to say? My head's still wrapping my head around the concept of competitive puzzle stacking in the case of Catherine. But I must concede, you're gonna have to. There's a lot more things you can make competitive than not.
Sure.
And more importantly, there's a lot more things you can invest time into positively for a community then not as well. And when I meant positive, I meant like for the betterment of others. Now then, that being said, this has been eye-opening in the sense that it's allowed me to really think about the level of criticism I give to certain games and the communities that play them, and really take a step back and be a bit more humble about it.
And I will continue to never join a Discord for a game.
That's, like, yeah, they're full of, good people exist in a number of different communities, especially in service. But, like, I can kind of understand why, speaking personally, you don't want to jump into some shit and just deal with some asshole being like, oh, yeah, this is really great and all, and then insert horrible thing here. Or my personal favorite, when you go to ask for advice for somebody and they're just like, I don't know, just play the game better. And you're like, oh, gee, thanks, asshole. Really appreciate that. Fucking Ripper! But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to interact with a community still, or a group of people over a shared love of something. Just, it's in some cases maybe it's just better to just figure out how to do that in healthy amounts of interaction, healthy instances of interaction.
I don't know what you're talking about. I will continue to make snap judgments on games I barely play, and people will love me for it.
I think I think that's also that too. I wanted to like encourage a means of like not making a snap judgment on something.
Okay.
Maybe I failed in that regard with this video, but I'm not sure. But I do know that coming out of it, that's what I want to do. Unless it's something that I can just look at and just go, yeah, okay, no, that's okay. I can agree. I think nobody can disagree with me on that. But that thing is really bad. Whatever that thing may be, who knows? Well, that's been me, 8StarKaijin.
Yeah.
What about you?
And that's also been me, Souslaus, aka Drunken Master 226, aka too many aliases to count.
Can I call you Seuss? Seuss?
No, you may not.
Can I call you Swoosh Loose?
No, you may not.
Can I call you my friend?
Maybe.
Alright, that's fair. Okay.
I'm gonna end on okay,
Me too.
I'm gonna cut out that last part. I'm gonna cut out that part where I said okay, maybe. Maybe I'll just end it on, can I call you my friend? No, I'm gonna end on okay and then just have the whole thing fade out with the Minecraft mine sound. Wow. Maybe, I'll try. Alright, let's cut the video recording then. Well, I didn't, so now it's gonna sound like I'm talking to myself.